Learning how to represent water within a drawing is a really useful tool because it can be a great addition to many artworks and landscapes, and learning how to do so specifically in the form of a wave is a really fun drawing exercise that not only is a great addition to your drawing repertoire and can be used in landscapes and many other artworks, but it is a great challenge to learn how to shade and how to use the pencil medium in order to create something very unique and complex such as a wave. So with that being said, hey guys, my name is Matt. Welcome to another video by artincontext.org where we explore various art related topics, and in today's tutorial we will be learning how to draw a wave with some pencil. Now there are many ways to approach a wave drawing, but in this particular video we'll be looking at some basic fundamental structures in terms of what a wave is actually comprised of. Now when we think of a wave, we basically think of this tunneling structure, and the way in which we can represent this is basically by first establishing a horizontal line on our page. Now this is just going to define the actual plane along which this wave forms. Now the idea is that what we want to break down is the wave in its most fundamental form or shape. And basically a wave is a cylindrical shape or a tube-like shape that basically allows the water to curl in on itself. So what we want to do is we basically want to draw in the cylindrical shape something similar to that of a pipe laying on its side, and the idea is that this is going to help us form the wave in this more naturalistic curling or tunneling quality. Simply by establishing the shape, we can kind of use these as a guideline or a parameter along which we can start to form our wave. Now basically we can form the cylindrical shape by drawing a circle, which we can then kind of connect horizontal lines to and give more curvature towards the end of that cylindrical shape. If we find it being too shorter, we can just add another circle to the cylindrical shape and then simply try and elongate it, and this is kind of helping us define how long or how short we'd like to represent our wave in our drawing. Now by nature of this, what we'll find is that we're creating this tunneling quality that we can see through the circular structure, and by nature of that we can also see how the outer surface area of that tube-like structure is going to establish the curling quality of the wave as it curls in on itself. Now the idea is that we're going to basically use this structure to form our wave. So what we want to do is we basically want to use the horizon line as the point at which the wave curls, or where it starts to basically create this end quality at the point at which it curls in on itself. And the idea is that once we start drawing these more zigzag lines or a little bit more of sporadic lines along this horizon line, we can start to basically represent this more liquid or water-like structure within our curling wave. Now the idea is that a wave can be thought of as this kind of C-like structure, so the letter C, and kind of curves and curls over to the point where you can only see partially inside of it. So basically we want to think of drawing these waves as a way of the tube-like structure basically being cut at a halfway point where we can see the bottom section of that inner section of the wave curling in on itself, but as it kind of curls outwardly and then back in on itself, we can see the outer surface area or the top structure of that wave. Now the idea is to basically work with a pencil sketch using this tube-like structure and the horizon line to establish these points within our wave. Again, when you make sure that the tube-like structure or the cylindrical structure is defining the form and the curling action of the wave, but where we have our horizon line, we can basically break the wave or establish its endpoints where it curls in on itself. And as we proceed with the sketch, we can also make sure that our lines are a little bit more squiggly, a little loose, not necessarily straight and jagged, again trying to represent a more water-like quality within our wave drawing. Now what we'll find is we can slowly start to develop this sketch with our pencils, where we basically form this bottom section as it uncurls or as it kind of moves into the curling quality of the wave. We can keep these lines a little bit more flat, moving along a more horizontal plane, but as the wave starts to curl in on itself, we can create these segments where we can see how the wave is having this more crashing or curling quality towards the top section of the wave. Now as we proceed with our sketch, we can slowly start to integrate these darker pencil marks, so maybe we can start thinking about using something a little softer like a 3B or up and above from a 3B pencil. And the idea is we're trying to represent shadow formations within the wave. Now when we basically draw water, we're working with a very abstract structure, and the idea is to represent more shadow moments and highlighted moments within the surface area of the water. Now the idea is that we have this darker part of water, but then we have these light lighter, whiter parts of water where the water crashes. Those lighter parts of water will be more on the curling or top section of the wave where it curls in on itself, and that is because crashing water tends to bubble up and therefore has this white quality. However, when water is moving in a swift direction, we want to basically add in some shading to kind of represent that quick movement within the water, and this we can do within the lower sections of the wave as it starts to flatten out, but also as it starts to curl inside of the wave where the shadows would obviously become greater, and then start to integrate these lines a little bit on top of the wave as well. But the idea is to kind of work in these zigzag motions of shading to represent this very abstract quality of ripples within the water. Now, water is very abstract, so the idea or the way in which we can represent these ripples within the water through a drawing process is to integrate these moments of shading that kind of form in this zigzag pattern along the surface area of the water as it flows and curls in on itself, but then also strategically leaving out these little negative moments to represent highlights within the water itself. Now, as you proceed with building up these moments of shading, you'll start to see how the wave actually starts to become a little bit more realistic in terms of how it represents or how water is represented within this drawing. And again, the idea is to keep these elongated zigzag moments of shading that kind of flow throughout the entire water structure or the entire wave structure. And as you do this, you can then slowly start to build up the gradients or the tonal values within these moments, especially where there would be more shadows, and this is naturally occurring in the areas where the barrel is, or the inner section of the barrel within the wave structure. Now, naturally, obviously, those areas are less exposed to light source, so they'll be slightly darker. So as we kind of build up our shading, we can start to integrate darker shading marks on top of our light shading marks and slowly build up those tonal values. And as we do this, again, we want to think about how the structure would be exposed to a light source. So naturally, as the water starts to flatten, specifically in the areas where the water is basically moving into that curl or that barrel shape, we can see that that area would tend to be, or at least be more exposed to light source than that of the areas inside of the barrel shape. Now, inside of the barrel shape, again, that's where light would be less able to kind of interact with that surface area of the water, so those areas can be slightly darker. But naturally, again, we want to think about two parts of water. We want to think about these darker qualities of water, and this is where we can start to integrate these very linear moments of shading, these zigzag qualities of shading to represent ripples within the water. But then we think about crashing water, and this is more towards the edge of the curl within the barrels of the wave. And naturally, those are the moments of crashing water that tend to be lighter, a little bit more disheveled in the sense that they bubble up more, and naturally this has a lighter and more white quality within our wave drawing. So we can kind of represent those qualities with more subtle shading and a little bit more of negative space used within a strategic way in terms of representing crashing water. Now we should start to see a few components within our drawing where we can see this flat water as it moves towards the wave, as it kind of recedes into the wave structure. Then we can see these more shaded zigzag structures to represent ripples within the water. And then naturally, as we come to the curling quality or the barrel within the wave itself, we can create these more kind of squiggly motions and utilize a lot more white or negative space on our page to represent crashing water. And again, we want to think about water in a variety of different ways. Again, water is very visually abstract, and there are many ways to draw and represent water. In a wave specifically, there are many moments where the water is changing, so we use these zigzaggy lines and moments of shading in that kind of form to represent water moving in a swift motion as it curls in on the wave. But we can also obviously represent these qualities, these more linear shading moments on top of the wave, on the top surface area as it curls in on itself, again just to create these qualities of quick motion. And the idea is that once we've established this with some light shading, we can slowly start to refine it with some darker shading, eventually kind of building up these tonal values. We also want to make sure that we darken the line work within the curl of the wave, especially because this is an area where the light source will be less prominent naturally, because this area is basically actually covered by the curling nature of the wave. And again, we do want to think about the light source. So we do want to maintain and keep a consistency in terms of these linear zigzag motions to represent swift motion within the water, but we do want to make the areas inside the wave slightly darker, or these features slightly darker, and then the areas where they would be more exposed to light source slightly lighter, and naturally trying to build up that realistic quality within our wave drawing. Now the idea is to take your time, again slowly building up these structures or these various components of your wave drawing, thinking about water, thinking about the light source, thinking about how this defines different qualities within the water. But as we kind of add or integrate some more shading into the crashing water, we do want to make sure that we keep our shading quite light and loose within the crashing water shape. So we want to have a good contrast between the water that is swiftly curling and then naturally how the white crashing water kind of differs from that type of water movement and structure. So again, water is very abstract visually because it can kind of take various shapes in terms of how it moves and forms in various ways. So we do want to think about these very unique qualities in a specific motion, and that is a wave curling motion. And the idea is that as we slowly build up these tonal values, we'll start to see how more realistic our wave drawing becomes in terms of this representation of swift curling water and then this white crashing water, or the representation of white crashing water. But ultimately guys, this is the basic process of how to approach a wave drawing. Very simple, very fun. Some key things to think about is water is really abstract, so it takes many forms in terms of what it is doing, especially when it comes to motion. So there are these moments of creating swift moving water through this kind of shading process of a zigzag linear like moments of shading, and the idea then is to also think about these more looser and more squiggly, more broader, bulbousy, bubbly like qualities within the water in terms of how to represent crashing water and how to integrate this with these more swift linear like motions within the water. And then naturally these will differ in tonal values and create that contrast, which creates a very unique representation of a wave. But ultimately that is the general process of how to create a wave drawing. Really simple, really fun, really great for integrating into various landscapes, especially as a detail when a landscape does have an ocean scene or an ocean setting present within the artwork. But otherwise guys, that is it from me today. If you liked the video, please let us know in the comment section below. If you are interested in related topics, we'd love to make more on elements and how to represent elements and how to draw them in a few easy steps. But otherwise, please like the video, please drop a subscribe. That helps us to grow the channel, which ultimately enables us to make more art related content for you guys and ultimately to build up this channel as an art resource. But otherwise guys, thanks again for tuning in. That is it from me today. Until next time, cheers.